What happens when two intellectual heavyweights, Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson, sit down to debate? On one side, the scientist who is purely interested in logical reason and factual truth. On the other, the psychologist who sees deep value in religion and its mythic language. For decades, Richard Dawkins has been the face of modern atheism. His works challenge not just religion, but its very validity in a world increasingly shaped by science and reason. He believes that religion is an evolutionary construct lacking any objective truth. On the other side, there's Jordan Peterson, arguably one of the most influential public intellectuals of our time. While he doesn't align with traditional religious doctrines, he sees immense value in their symbolic framework. He believes they express timeless truths and offer reflections on the deeper transcendent aspects of reality. So when these two figures debate, it's more than just individual perspectives. It's a reflection of the broader cultural moment. A time when many are asking whether the language of science is enough to explain all of reality, and if religion still holds a place in our modern world. To guide such a conversation requires someone who can navigate both worlds with insight and balance. That's where Alex O'Connor comes in as the moderator. As an atheist, Alex is no stranger to critiquing religion. Yet what makes him truly unique is his decision to study theology, an unusual path for someone so deeply rooted in the atheist worldview. This dual perspective gives him a rare ability to bridge the gap. He understands the rigorous demands of scientific reasoning while also engaging deeply with the language and frameworks of religion. The debate that followed had its moments of friction, as you might expect when two forces with such different worldviews clash.
I think, Dr. Peterson, you're drunk on symbols.
Yes, you mentioned. I've heard that comment. Yeah.
Much of the time was spent with Jordan Peterson attempting to explain his perspective to Richard Dawkins. Peterson spoke for the vast majority of the time, clearly on a mission, one that he feels compelled to articulate. The idea that religious stories hold truths that are deeply significant, even if they aren't scientifically factual. This, in essence, is the central tension of the debate: factual truth versus symbolic truth. For Dawkins, truth is grounded in the material, measurable world.
Quantum physics is deeply mysterious, and you're saying that biblical texts are deeply mysterious. The difference is quantum physics, the predictions you derive from quantum physics, are fulfilled to the umpteenth decimal place.
To him, religious stories are evolutionary relics, partially interesting perhaps, but devoid of objective reality. Peterson passionately pushes back against this notion. A significant portion of the debate is spent with Peterson explaining the profound truths of the biblical story, like the virgin birth, the historicity of Cain, and Moses and the bronze serpent. Peterson believes that dismissing these stories simply because they don't conform to scientific standards of truth risks losing the fundamental structures that have shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. Dawkins remains unconvinced, and Peterson struggles to bridge the gap. His passionate arguments fail to impress Dawkins, not because they lack conviction, but simply because they arise from a perspective that he fundamentally does not accept.
Well, it doesn't get me, it doesn't impress me. I mean, I like reality, and it obviously impresses Jordan, and that's fine. It just, we have a different kind of mind.
But in the final moments of the debate, something truly fascinating happens. There seems to be a moment of alignment. After Peterson provides a detailed explanation of the symbolic nature of the dragon as an archetypical representation that carries meaning across time, Dawkins acknowledges it.
I think it's an interesting idea that Jungian archetypes could be Baldwinized memes.
And perhaps the dragon could be one of those.
By conceding that a dragon can be a meme, Dawkins acknowledges how a mythical symbol can correspond with a concept he himself coined. In this brief moment, we see a real potential for common ground between two seemingly irreconcilable worldviews. Meme and dragon are central concepts to Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson. In a way, the words are symbolic of the ideas they represent. Although the word meme has become widely popular in the past 2 decades due to social media, it was actually Dawkins who coined the term in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. He proposed that just as genes replicate and are passed on through biological evolution, a meme is an idea that spreads through cultural transmission.
something that spreads not by DNA replication, but by imitation from mind to mind. So it could be a fashion in clothes, it could be a musical style, it could be an accent.
Peterson's claim is that the archetype dragon is a deep meme. The psychological concepts of archetypes, coined by Carl Jung, are universal symbols and patterns that recur across cultures throughout history. They can be observed in myths, religions, literature, and art. Peterson highly popularized the idea through his lectures. Just as Richard Dawkins had made the ideas of Charles Darwin more accessible to a wider audience, Peterson has done the same for Carl Jung. One could say that they are modern interpreters of both these thinkers, the ones who have translated their ideas for our time. Both these schools of thought have very different languages to understand and interpret the world. Throughout, we see Peterson uncomfortable and at times rambling because he is trying to explain the ideas enmeshed in the history of religions into the Darwinian scientific worldview, which has no framework to accept even the premises of the arguments as valid. With these two thinkers coming from completely different schools of thought, with drastically opposing ways of understanding and interpreting the world, Peterson is well aware that their conversation could take multiple directions.
There's various ways that this conversation could go sideways, right? Seriously. Like, either of us could try to win. Either of us could try to demonstrate our intellectual superiority, right? Each of us could misrepresent the other. Or we could both try, and I do think we are in fact trying that, and I think Alex is helping along with that just fine. We could try to follow the thread of the exploratory truth and see if we could get somewhere.
Among all the possible paths, I believe this debate landed on what Peterson describes as the thread of exploratory truth, a fusion of horizons. The discussion is difficult to present in a linear fashion, as it did not unfold that way. It was a constant back and forth with ideas introduced from multiple angles. However, a clear thread can be traced in the arguments despite the different tangents it takes. After Peterson explains the myths surrounding dragons, Dawkins responds,
I'm not interested in dragons, I'm interested in reality.
Peterson then anchors the idea of dragons through a scientific concept that Dawkins is familiar with.
Okay, is there such a thing as a predator?
Of course.
The claim that Peterson makes here is that the dragon is an imagistic representation of a predator.
And then wouldn't the fundamental task of edible primates be to figure out how to overcome the dragon forever?
I don't know why you say dragon. I mean, we have lions, we have tigers, we have saber-tooths, we have
Why not
tyrannosaurs
abstract?
out there.
Right, but why not abstract? Because it's for the same reason that we have the term predator. Like, we have the term bear, lion, Komodo dragon. Well, you make an amalgamation, you say, well, the relevant set of features is an image. Well, what's the image? Predator as such. What's the image of that? The dragon that never disappears.
At this point, Alex interjects with a clarification.
So a dragon is a pictorial representation of the abstracted concept of a predator.
Yes.
As you say, we already have the term predator. And so it might be useful in art, in narrative, you can't paint an abstract.
His clarification aims to categorize things back into the categories that Dawkins and Peterson belongs to. Lions, eagles, snakes, and fire are scientifically observable entities, and thus the term predator can be used to classify them. However, a dragon does not exist in the natural world and only exists in myths, religion, and art, and he insists on making this distinction clear. Alex frames his question very concretely.
You would say that lions are an instantiation of this bracket term of predator.
Well, I would also say...
Would you therefore say that a lion is an instantiation of the bracket term of dragon?
Yes.
Affirmative yes is to break the conventional connotation of the term predator from a strictly scientific perspective and allowing it to extend into a religious and mythological framework. Throughout the debate, he is trying to dissolve the rigid compartmentalization of these worldviews. His argument is that we are not merely about labeling things in a detached manner, as though we are merely observers labeling the world. What truly matters for human beings is that we, as existential beings, can be harmed by predators. Myths and stories are, therefore, the means by which we engage with the reality of predators. But what do these myths about the dragon tell us about the human condition?
Because we're not only fact-oriented creatures, right? It actually matters to us whether we get eaten. Like it's one thing to lay out the nomenclature of the animal kingdom, but it's another thing to remember that predators can eat you. It's so interesting because you can imagine rabbit mythology, which would be something like, predator appears, freeze. But that's not the human story. The human story is predator appears, there's a treasure somewhere. Right? That's a completely different pathway of evolutionary significance. Like the way that we construe the world isn't freeze like predator. It's like, oh, there's a predator. Maybe there's something valuable lurking in our conflict with it.
Although this does not fully convince Richard Dawkins, we see him shift his analysis towards the evolutionary development of predator and prey.
This is almost certainly the result of an arms race, probably between predators and prey, could be between parasites and hosts. Mm-hmm. And so if we are talking about adaptations to just the climate, woolly rhinoceroses grow hair because it's getting cold. That's relatively boring. Mm-hmm. But when it's an adaptation to a predator, then you get an escalation of adaptations by prey, which are countered by predators, which are countered by prey, so you get a gradual escalation.
By likening the interaction of predator and prey to an arms race, Dawkins moves from a purely fictional mode of interpretation to a more symbolic and cultural perspective. He too is now speaking in a category that gradually dissolved the strict boundaries of his school of thought, moving towards a space where the scientific and symbolic interpretations begin to overlap. Peterson then uses the symbolic reading of the predator to articulate the relevance of myths.
Okay, so let's take the idea of arms race. All right, so here's how I would construe what I said in what I think might be your terms.
Okay.
All right, we transformed the battle with the predator into a meme battle. We abstracted it so that we could figure out how to deal not with a predator, but with the class of all possible predators. Right, exactly. And the appropriate way to deal with the class of all possible predators is something like a meta-ethic.
Hopefully we've landed on a point of somewhat agreement between Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson, which I think is a pretty significant success, I would say, in many ways.
This debate is a testament to the cultural moment in which we live, a time when the distinction between science and religion are losing its rigid boundaries. Dawkins as a representative of scientific rationalism and Peterson as a defender of the value of religion reveal how two isolated language structures which have historically existed in tension can interact. Despite the moments of friction, the unexpected alignment highlights how empirical truth and symbolic truth can speak to each other. The acknowledgement of the dragon as a meme signals a shift towards a more integrated understanding, one that embraces the complexity of human knowledge and experience.